everyone, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsStamp.com and thank you for joining me today. In this video, I will be creating a hot tropical background featuring Emboss Distress Resist technique, and I'll be using it to create Good Times Flamingo card. I'm going to start out by creating a background for my card using Distress inks. I have Distress Sprayer, a sheet of watercolor cardstock, no stick craft mat, and Distress inks here. I want lots of vibrant colors, so I'm going with a few colors of ink, and I have a fossilized amber, crushed olive, peacock feathers, and festive berries here. I'm going to add a bit of each color to my craft mat. I'm just adding color here and there and going to spray this with water to create water droplets on my mat. Next, I'm placing my watercolor cardstock over the ink and pressing down slightly with my fingers to make sure my paper absorbs the water with the ink nicely. I'm going to lift this up and dry with my heat tool. I will be adding more ink over this, so to make sure my colors do not mix, I need to dry the first layer. I'm also using a rag, this is my crafty rag, and soaking up some of the water and some of the ink in a few sections. Once this is dry, I'm going to come back to my water and ink drops on my mat and going to dip my paper again to pick up more ink, and again we'll dry this with my heat tool. I'm going to repeat this a couple more times to get a desired amount of ink on my paper. Now, this might not look like much at first, but as we add more ink and as we do the Emboss Resist, it will completely change its look and will be absolutely fun. I'm going to blend some more ink onto the background, onto some of the sections, and I'm first going with peacock feathers. Next, I'm using quite a bit of festive berries, and finally I will blend some of that fossilized amber onto my background piece. You can use whatever colors you like. Again, you don't have to blend any more color, but I felt like I wanted to add some more color. And I went with those specific colors because I recently got a few new colors of Distress inks. The fossilized amber and festive berries were new for me. And I wanted to experiment and test those inks out and play. And I also wanted to have a bold and vibrant background so that it would work nicely for a tropical card. Now I want to stamp an image onto this background and heat emboss it in clear embossing powder to do Emboss Resist. But this particular paper, this watercolor paper, has some texture to it. And the more texture there is on the paper, the more uneven the stamping is going to be. So completely by accident, I stumbled upon a trick that helps me to get rid of this texture. And the trick is very simple. You need to sand your piece of paper through your die cutting machine using just cutting plates. So no die, just the cutting plates and the paper in between the plates. Now make sure that you have a nice and smooth plate on top of your paper so that you don't get any cut marks on your background. And once you run it through, it becomes very smooth and it loses a lot of its texture. Of course, you can use smooth watercolor paper to begin with, but I didn't have any on hand at the time, so I used this trick to get rid of the texture on my paper. Next, I'm going to heat emboss Flamingo background image onto this piece with the help of clear embossing powder. I'm first treating my paper with an anti-static powder tool, and I also dried it with a heat tool to make sure it was bone dry. Next, I'm doing a test run by pouring embossing powder and checking if it sticks to any of the sections. It did stick on the sides just a little bit, but I knew I'd be trimming this piece down, so this wasn't a problem for me. If it is a problem for you, you can go back and dry this piece with a heat tool some more. I'm going to ink up my stamp with Versamark ink. This is clear sticky ink, perfect for heat embossing, and we'll place my paper on top and we'll press down with my fingers. Now you can either press with your fingers or use a brayer. I like to use a brayer for this as it allows me to apply even pressure to my paper and make sure I get even and complete ink transfer. Now this particular brayer is from Clear Snap and I've had it for several years already, but any other brayer would work great for this. Adding clear embossing powder covering the entire background, I'm going to go ahead and get my heat tool good and hot and we'll melt the powder on this background. Now you can begin to see some of those flamingos embossed in clear. They shine there on the background. Now we're doing a resist technique, so we used clear embossing powder to protect the ink, Distress ink, under the embossed flamingos. Those are now resisting whatever medium we put on top of them. So if we were to blend more ink over this background, the heat embossed flamingos would resist it. Instead, I want to lift the ink that is already there and make the non-embossed sections lighter. Distress ink reacts with water, so I'm going to spray water over my entire background, use my crafty rug again, and soak up the water and pick up the ink at the same time to make the background lighter. And as I start doing this, you can really begin to see those heat embossed flamingos as they remain vibrant, while the rest of the background loses its color and becomes much lighter. And you can add more water to pick up even more color if you want, but I'm pretty happy with the way it looks right now. Now I'm going to stamp a few images to decorate this card. And since this is all about the tropics, I'm going with flamingos from the Summertime Animals stamp set and stamping those in VersaFine Onyx Black ink and also stamping a golf ball from Sports Ball stamp set. Now I wanted to use it as a beach ball on my card. I couldn't find any beach ball image in my stash, so I thought that this golf ball looked kind of like a beach ball. At least it does look like that to me. So I'm going to quickly watercolor these images, and I'm using Distress inks again. I'm going with Spun Sugar, Abandoned Coral, Worn Lipstick, and Festive Berries. I'm doing just very quick watercoloring here, nothing special. And once my images are colored, I'm going to cut these out using matching dies. Next, I'm going to use a stitched circle die from Simon, and we'll cut out a circle opening in my watercolor panel. I want my flamingos to peek from behind the panel, so this is why I needed that opening. And I also trimmed my background panel to 4 by 5.5 inches. I'm going to heat emboss a sentiment that reads #GoodTimes, and I'm using Hero Art's white embossing powder and embossing this onto black cardstock for a bit of contrast on my card. I also want to stamp a tropical leaf, and I'm using Mint Candy ink from Simon to stamp it, and I'll also cut it out using a matching die. Now, to foam mount this piece, I'm going to cheat a little bit here and create an identical panel out of fun foam covered with double-sided adhesive. So here I've cut the panel out of yellow fun foam, and I'm going to trim it and also use my scissors to enlarge the circle opening so that no foam shows from the sides of the card. You can by all means use foam adhesive to adhere this panel down, but since it warped a little bit from all the heat and all the water, I decided to use a layer of fun foam instead. This not only helped to adhere it down, but it also helped to flatten this panel a little bit. So I adhered the fun foam to the back of my watercolor panel and adhered it onto an A2 top folding card base. Next, I used foam adhesive and tucked my flamingos inside. Now I trimmed their feet or their legs off as I only needed the body of the flamingos to show. In this way I could reuse the legs and make it appear as if I actually colored and die cut 4 flamingos instead of 2. So it looks like I have 4 birds on this card. I foam mounted the sentiment in the center of this panel and also adhered the mint leaf. And finally added several clear sequins and drops from Pretty Pink Posh to finish this card. Now, I actually made 2 cards like this. I made 2 backgrounds and wanted to use both, so I made 2 cards just for fun. Now, even though I used identical colors of Distress ink, I still got a slightly different background on each of my projects. So I encourage you to pull out your Distress inks, grab a background stamp, and have fun with this Emboss Distress Resist technique. You can find the list of supplies I used for this project down below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet done so. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!